Good afternoon. Louis Sun, Public Works Director, Foster City. With me today was supposed to be our mayor, Mayor Richa Awasti, and she couldn't make it today, so apologize for this change. But I'm looking for volunteers. Anybody would like to sit up here? You can be my panelist. Pretend to be my panelist. It's kind of lonely just being here by myself, so feel free to come up here and sit here. I want to go ahead and just introduce our project team. Just looking at the screen here, our designer is Schaff and Wheeler. They're sort of a local designer. And with them, we have a bunch of sub-consultants that worked on various aspects of the project. Apologize for down here, the contractor and the CM team has been swapped. The contractor is actually Shimmick Construction, and the CM team is Tanner Pacific Incorporated. So, project background. How many of you have been to Foster City? Just curious. Oh, who got some hands here? Great. So I usually don't include this slide because usually I do this as regional and everybody there knows Foster City and they know more about Foster City than me. So, but I just want to show this map. Just give a little bit of history of Foster City. It's a fairly new city. It was incorporated back in 1971. It was designed by a gentleman named Jack Foster. What he did is he basically reclaimed land. So everything in Foster City is basically engineer fill. So early in the city, there was a lot of concern about settling. So, as time progressed, and we had several large earthquake event has happened, we find that the city is pretty stable. And also, when he first designed the city, he marketed it as sort of the island of the Blue Lagoon. And I'll talk a little bit more about the lagoon. It's actually one of the pride of the city. Continue with project background. Just want to look at this chart right here. You can see the levee system in red. And also you can see the orange or the yellow. That represents San Mateo's levee. And back in 2012, there was a FEMA accreditation sort of an audit. And San Mateo, they passed the audit, and unfortunately, we did not. So that sort of started the process of the levee project. And if you look at the shaded gray, the zone X, the shaded gray, that represents sort of the protected area with the combined levee system from San Mateo and Foster City. As you can see, the levee system itself actually protects a lot of areas, within sort of the San Mateo, the greater San Mateo area. And it provides about 100-year flood protection and for roughly 17,000 properties in both San Mateo and Foster City. I mentioned about the event back in 2012. So when the audit happened and FEMA accreditation, Foster City didn't pass. So the city leadership at that time, they decided, we don't want to argue with FEMA. Actually, we want to do something about it. So they started the process. They're looking at ways of building this levee. And it starts with sort of a survey and, identifying, just to make sure that whatever FEMA find is correct. And we also started the levee protection planning study. In 2014 all the way to 2020, 6 years. That's about how long it took. And if you listen to the previous presentation, they talked about sea level rise and the protection that cities need to do. And if you look at our map earlier, we're basically surrounded, right, by the bay, by San Francisco Bay. And knowing that, sea level rise is a real thing, our resident, they took that seriously. So in 2017, so our city council adopted sort of the final EIR, and we went out to Measure P, which authorized about $90 million of bond, general obligation bond sale. And it passed with an 81% approval rating. And I think that number tell you something that the residents of Foster City, and really, if you look at the residents that live near the coast, they believe in that. So that's a very telling number. I don't know how many times bonds get passed and what the rate is, but usually I don't see this high of a passing rate. And finally, we went through a long process of the planning and environmental stage, and finally in 2020, the design is completed. It was advertised, and we started construction in 2020. Again, mentioning about project funding, the city sold general obligation bond, Measure P, with roughly almost 81% of approval rating for $90 million. And we are actually not using the full $90 million. I think we sold about $85 million to fund the entire project. The bid came in about $67 million, but the other additional funding is used for the soft costs and contingencies and so forth. And aside for the $5 million that we haven't sold, we also have, City Council wanted additional contingencies. So we've been putting a lot of reserve in our capital improvement project to prepare for this large project for us. And if you look at the second bullet, the first year rate will be approximately $36 per $100,000 of assessed property value. And you know that property value in in LA and also in the Bay Area is sky high. But you can see the math here. Our residents, they'd rather fund this $90 million bond to protect their property and then risk at least paying for that flood insurance, which with this project, they would be able to buy in on a lower flood insurance. Just a little bit more on Measure P. So again, it allows the resident to avoid sort of the mandatory expensive flood insurance that I mentioned. And it also protects essential city services, during storms, and protects Levee from earthquake damage and so forth. And if you look at this picture, this is the San Mateo Bridge in the background. And right now, the project is about a year in, and we still have about roughly 2 more years left. So I'll talk a little bit more about the schedule. Here it is. This is sort of the rough schedule, initial schedule when it first came out. Again, our project started October 2020. It's anticipated to be completed in January 2024, and there's 3 phases. Early on in the project, the contractor asked that if we can basically allow them to work on the levee, all of it, all at once, so essentially close the whole levee. And if you've been to our city, you know that our levee is not just for protecting against sea level rise, but it's actually a really popular recreational location. A lot of people use the trails, the bay trails along the levee, and to close that for basically, a couple of years, as you can imagine, we receive a lot of opposition early on in the project. But the benefit is we will be able to get this project done sooner, and we're anticipating opening in phases as we complete each of these phases. The bars have changed since this particular schedule has been created. We've encountered several different, in terms of in the construction, there's a couple of changes which shifted these phases, but we're still trying to, and we're pretty confident we're still going to meet the end dates on these different phases, and ultimately will be completed in January 2024. Unique challenges. Bird nesting restrictions. This is in the south part of the levee, and in the southern part of our city, there's a lot of slough. This one in particular is called the O'Neill Slough. Apparently, a lot of birds, they nest in this area. It's a protected habitat. I actually didn't know what a Ridgeway rail or the California black rail looked like, so I had to Google that before this presentation, but apparently they do nest in here. What happened is during the nesting season, which is usually around springtime, we're not allowed to do any construction in this area. we're not allowed to disturb the habitat. So that is extremely challenging. It makes the construction timetable roughly 6, maybe 7 months. So a good chunk of the year where our contractor are not able to go in and do the work. So that itself is basically forcing the contractor to be creative in their scheduling. Another challenge is recreational water users. We have a lot of resident and non-resident. They enjoy coming to Foster City. There's several launch points within the levee allows water users to access the bay. I was told that this is sort of a world-class location just because the location, the physical location of Foster City and the way the wind is, it's very ideal for windsurfers and other water users to come in and enjoy the bay. We had to deal with a lot of sort of working with the group and understanding their needs and trying to adjust our construction schedule to anticipate, when their season is really starting from at the end of April all the way to almost at the end of November. So again, they have a really long window, and that's a challenging part for our contractor not to be able to work in parts of the levee during that window. I will mention another challenge, and I don't have it on the slide. It's really early on in the project. I mentioned we decided, or the city council decided to close the whole levee all at once, and that received a lot of negative reaction from our residents. And unfortunately, the city wasn't prepared at the time. So the lessons learned is be engaged with the community, stay in front of that. So I think that debacle, when that happened, city ended up hiring a PR firm to help kind of resolve that problem. Trepepe Smith is the firm that we hired. They're still with us, and we're doing a lot more regular updates to the community, and that's something that we should have done that, even before the start of the project. So project design, again, I'm dealing a lot with the regulatory agencies. As you can see right here on the list, there are just a ton of regulatory agencies that we have to go through and get permission from them. And again, that sort of dragged out the permitting period. It took almost 2 years to get all the permits so we can start this project. A little bit on the design overview. If you look at the box, it shows the improved elevation of the final levee. And if you look at the color code, it tells you what the existing levee elevation is right now. Not all areas require a really high levee. It's just depending on geography. So if you look at the bottom at section 7, you'll notice that right now the existing levee is about 12 to 13 feet. And if you look at the final elevation, it's only 13.5. So we're only raising the levee by about 6 inches. So that's not a lot. But if you look as we progress up north towards the Summit Hill Bridge, especially look at that red section right there, we're actually reinforcing and building a levee all the way up to 7 feet. So it varies in height. There are really 3 different types of levee walls. There are earthen levee, the conventional fillet wall, and the hybrid sheet pile wall. Early on, our designer looked at actually focusing more on the conventional flood wall. And in order to construct that, you have to build sort of a hybrid or a sheet pile wall in front of it so you can form the concrete. So they looked at that, and they did a little bit more of a value engineering and decided that we can probably save money just basically creating these hybrid sheet pile wall, which essentially we're gonna leave the sheet pile there, and that will be part of the wall system. So looking at the next slide, the hybrid sheet pile wall, it consists roughly about 70% of the entire levee system, and the earthen wall is roughly about 17%, and the rest 13% is made out of the conventional flood wall. Most of the flood wall, it's really scattered throughout throughout the levee system, but a lot of it is in the north part near the San Mateo Bridge. The levee wall height, most of the wall height will be around 2.5 to 3.5 feet above the walking surface. So right now, if you go there, you watch the sheet pile. All the sheet piles are in, all the concrete caps are done. But if you're there now, you look at it, it's really high. That's just because we haven't quite finished yet, and there's a lot of fill in terms of filling the concrete path or the walkway, the walk path. So, but once it's done, it's only going to be about 2.5 to 3.5 feet in terms of. You can see up there on top of the rendering. That's about how high the wall is going to be from the bayside perspective. Here's some pictures. Again, over here you can see the concrete piles. This part right here is nearly done. It's really only thing left is probably just a couple inches of asphalt that needs to pave. So this kind of give you a good perspective what a finishing wall will look like. And again, this is kind of looking north towards San Mateo Bridge, and this is just looking backward. Here on this rendering, it's the access point, one of the 20-some access point, water access point to the levee. And all of the access points are basically concrete flood walls. And as you can see, there's ramps, ADA accessibility, allowing people to get onto the walkway and also getting down to the water path. Just want to show you some more project rendering. This is actually is what we call Park Royal, and it's in the southern part of the levee system, southern part of the city. Over here, if you remember, we're only raising about 6 inches of the levee, so you can barely see the wall itself. And again, over here, this is sort of in phase 1 and phase 2. Majority of the levee is this hybrid sheet pile, and this is kind of what it looks like, end product of that. And over here is right underneath the San Mateo Bridge. This is probably the highest the levee that we'll see in the project. This is a concrete flood wall, and the wall itself is about 6 to 7 feet tall. We didn't want to put it on the bay side because that's just going to obstruct views, and people will not be able to see the bay. So we designed it to be closer on the roadside. Just want to show some more construction pictures. You've seen this one already. Here's on the bottom here, a contractor installing sheet piles, and over here they're working on the concrete cap. In the background you can see I think those are the Oracle buildings in Redwood City. Over here you see some drainage work. We have Allen block walls in the northern section of the levee. Here you see the construction photos of that. And over here, this is also north part of the levee. Contractor laying down aggregate base. And I believe this is the last slide. We do have 2 bridges that we installed, and this is in the southern part of the levee. This is in the area, we call it the Baffin Street area. So that's the Baffin Street Bridge. It's for pedestrian access. On the other end is Belmont, and this will connect basically Foster City to Belmont. And at the other end of, and next to it is the slough, it's the Belmont Slough. And then the bridge itself is connecting the Belmont Slough to the O'Neill Slough. At the end of the O'Neill Slough, we have another bridge, and that basically will connect Foster City with the city of San Mateo. And we have one pedestrian bridge. This is the old bridge, existing bridge that's being demolished and taken away, but a new one will be fabricated and it will be installed in the same location. With that, this is end of my presentation and open for questions. Very good. No questions. Yeah. All right. And if you want to find out more information about it, there's a website, and there's a mayor's email. You can send an email to our mayor. So, all right, thank you.